December 31, 1999. The clock is relentlessly ticking down toward a moment the entire world has literally been dreading for years. In a windowless suite on Vermont Avenue in Washington, D.C., John Koskinen is pacing the floor. He's the guy President Bill Clinton tapped to run the national Y2K effort. And right now, he's walking through a massive, multi-million-dollar facility built entirely for one single night of use. He and a few dozen federal officials are manning the ultimate midnight bunker. They're sitting there, completely tense, staring at banks of telephones, glowing TV monitors, and these vast wall maps, just waiting for the reports to roll in from state governments, utilities, airlines, and foreign capitals as midnight crosses the planet. So why is this high-stakes command center even a thing? It all goes back to a shockingly simple, decades-old shortcut. And here is the absolute wildest part of this whole story. This impending global disaster, it wasn't the result of some highly complex cyberweapon. It was entirely caused by programmers trying to save space on actual physical cardboard punch cards back in the 1960s. The logic was trivially simple. Every single character punched into those cards cost money. So coders writing in early languages like COBOL just recorded years as 2 digits. 1965 simply became 65. The machine just assumed the leading 19. And this little space-saving trick survived the jump from cardboard to magnetic tape and then to disk, remaining deeply embedded in millions of lines of legacy code long after memory became dirt cheap. As the year 2000 rushed toward them, sheer panic set in. You had companies frantically dragging retired COBOL programmers back to work at crazy premium rates. But here's the kicker. A lot of organizations didn't actually fix the defect. They used a cheaper workaround called windowing. Basically, it just told a computer to interpret small 2-digit years as belonging to the 21st century and larger ones to the 20th century. They didn't remove the threat at all. They literally just kicked the can down the road, buying themselves a little more time, but basically hoping they'd find shit on other things to compensate longer the decade. This ticking clock forced a massive global mobilization. But the true nightmare? It extended far beyond legacy mainframes. The terrifying, invisible scope of the problem was actually hiding in everyday machinery. We're talking about billions of tiny microcontrollers tucked inside elevators, medical monitors, traffic signals, refinery controllers, pipeline valves, power station instruments, the whole shebang. And nobody knew exactly which ones were date-sensitive. Figuring that out meant physical inventory and isolation testing on a scale that is just mind-boggling. Utilities and manufacturers had to run clock rollover trials on isolated gear for 2 solid years, just to see what would break. The financial stakes to fix this invisible threat were astronomical. To put it into perspective, the U.S. Department of Commerce later reported $100 billion spent domestically across public and private sectors. Globally, research firms estimated the final bill hit up to $600 billion. Naturally, all this money and uncertainty fueled immense paranoia. Public anxiety just completely outran the actual engineering reality. Civilians were frantic, stockpiling fuel, generators, canned food, cash. Airlines were preemptively slashing flight schedules for January 1st. But it wasn't just everyday people bracing for impact. Out in Colorado, at the Joint Center for Year 2000 Strategic Stability, Russian military officers were sitting side by side with American officers. Just think about that for a second. They were watching American early warning radar displays together because they were absolutely terrified a date glitch might trigger an accidental nuclear missile alert. They literally sat in the same room, staring at the exact same screens just to make perfectly sure nobody started World War III over a computer bug. Which brings us right back to that empty room in Washington. The New Year's Terminator is sweeping west across the globe. The tension in that bunker is palpable. And then, midnight arrives, first in Kiribati, then New Zealand at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And shockingly, the lights in Auckland stay on. By noon Eastern, midnight crosses Asia. Fireworks burst over the Sydney Harbor Bridge without a single incident. Hour by hour, as the darkness rolls across Europe and the Atlantic, capital after capital reports functioning power, functioning telephones, and running banks. John Koskinen even boards a commercial flight that morning just to prove the skies are safe. By the time 2000 hits the US West Coast at 3 a.m., the coordination center is just dead quiet. Instead of a crescendo, the whole threat just completely fizzles out. I mean, look at the contrast between the doomsday predictions and reality. We went from fearing a total global grid collapse to 150 slot machines stopping in Delaware. We braced for nuclear meltdowns and got a minor alarm at the Shika nuclear plant in Japan that didn't even affect operations. Government breakdown? Well, the U.S. Naval Observatory website displayed the year as 19100. A few credit card terminals and video rental systems misstated records. And that was pretty much it. Nothing cascaded. And so we're left with this haunting final image on the morning of January 1st. Inside that multi-million-dollar Washington Coordination Center, cleaners are quietly pushing their carts past unplugged monitors. They're sweeping the floors under a giant wall map that is still lit completely green from Kiribati all the way to Alaska. The fierce debate over what really happened began before the sun even came up. Skeptics were quick to point out that countries like Italy and South Korea spent proportionally way less money and suffered absolutely no more disruption than the US, arguing the whole thing was massively inflated by consultants and vendors just trying to sell replacement systems. But defenders fired right back. They argued the intense, years-long remediation is exactly why the grid held, basically forcing a desperately needed modernization of our neglected infrastructure. So looking back at that quiet, green-lit room, did a $100 billion engineering effort save the modern world, or was the greatest digital threat we ever faced just a massive, lucrative illusion?